Hello, my name is Melanie Thorley and this is Chris De Santana and we are solicitors at MJT Law and this is our next podcast. Welcome to our new space.
Yeah, our new space. So I think a couple podcasts ago we mentioned that we had moved the whole office around. This is our new sort of kind of chillax area.
It is. We've got like a little video game space here and
we've got
sofas and stuff like that. I don't know, how are you finding it?
I find it's nice. I find it's quite kind of separated from the rest of the office. So you kind of have a little bit of seclusion there if you want to kind of free your brain. We've got our Nintendo.
We do. Not that we're already good at it.
That's not true. Remember when we first got it, Melanie less so, but certainly Nia and I, we were hopeless. I think what were we playing? We were playing Donkey Kong. And couldn't get past the first level. like not even. I don't even think I could get past the first kind of.
Yeah, the barrels out.
Yeah, the first obstacle. But it didn't take long. Like I think within half an hour we. Kind of finished it.
Except the games last like 20 seconds.
Yeah, there was a lot of lives in between.
Yeah, there were a lot of lives. No, it was a lot of fun. So we've got this kind of new setup now that everything's kind of here instead of where we were. And hopefully it's going to make a lot of sense.
I think it'd be pretty good.
Yeah, it's nice. Well, welcome everyone. I've got a couple of things to talk about today, and my brother brought up cryptocurrency.
Right, because that's been very big at
the moment.
There's a lot of stuff happening in the crypto world.
And this kind of, whether you call it artificial or not, of the buoyancy of cryptocurrency, especially now Tesla's just announced they're going to pay for, they're going to purchase 1.5 billion.
Yeah, I think it's 1.5 billion, and I think they also said that they're going to accept it as payment.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going to do. So, look, I'm not across this particularly well, but I assume if you want to buy a Tesla car, you can take your cryptocurrency and then pay for it somehow with that, and then you receive the car. So, like, it's cash money.
It's like cash, but isn't cryptocurrency more closer to, I would consider, shares? I mean, it's a bit hard to... Purchasing things with shares is doable.
Yeah. What price do you pay today?
Yeah, and for the most part, shares will be fine because it doesn't fluctuate too much. But when it's fluctuating hundreds of dollars a day...
Well, I'm sure that there's a lot of arguments out there that there are cryptocurrencies out there that are quite stable. But I'm with you on this one. I think that cryptocurrency is too unstable. But the question came up about paying people in cryptocurrency.
Right.
So I was kind of thinking about this because it occurred to me that my immediate reaction is, in Australia it is not possible to pay an employee through any other means than Australian dollars. It's just kind of what I think, yeah? And then I started looking into this and like, where is that written? And it's not.
Well, you certainly have a lot of people who are paid in shares and
yeah, but I'm talking about your daily salary. I'm talking about your minimum wage. I'm talking about working as an employee at Woolworths, and you're under the general retail award. Well, you might not be because you're under an enterprise agreement, but there's nowhere it says. It just talks about the dollar sign.
Yeah.
And so I was assuming that this means actual Australian dollars.
Currency. Yeah.
Australian dollar currency. But then I started thinking about it more, and it doesn't actually stipulate it anywhere in the Fair Work Act.
But surely there'd be a sort of public policy issue here where, I mean, the potential here is that if you're being paid minimum wage, you get, even if it's shares or it's cryptocurrency or it's in fact any investment, that by the time you receive it or within a week, it's worth way less. And
one might argue that about inflation or deflation. I mean,
but
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we take ourselves back to the end of World War II. There were a lot of countries, and there are still a lot of countries in a lot of pain when it comes to their inflation. But I was very young back then, obviously. But I recall when I was at school, people were talking about taking suitcases full of money to buy bread and things like that. And I just wonder if you do that, if you end up paying people in something that's less stable, less backed, less star rated, all those things, that they're going to end up getting $100 and by the afternoon it's worth 20, or it might be worth 120, and it's just this kind of.
So it's not so much, because when you think of currency broadly speaking, you're right. If inflation rates were massive, then it's equally as problematic as cryptocurrency and shares and anything.
It's true, but we're in Australia. We're an apex country, so.
What about countries that are not?
Well, exactly, but. Maybe for them, cryptocurrency is the way to go. I actually don't know. Taking it out of the, the Australian stock market and the investment, sort of traditional investments, and taking it out of the country, because cryptocurrency is not about being in a country. It's a product. So it's just kind of really interesting. And when you talk about public policy, I had to go back to the Fair Work Act and kind of think about what they were trying to achieve and what it says in there. Right at the very beginning of the Fair Work Act, we talk about
the objects.
The objects of the Act.
Is it Section 3?
Section 3. So it says, the object of this Act is to provide a balanced framework for cooperative and productive workplace relations that promotes national economic prosperity and social inclusion for all Australians by, I'm not going to go too far, guys, providing workplace relations laws that are fair to working Australians, are flexible for businesses, promote productivity, economic growth for Australian future economic prosperity, and to take into account the Australia's international labour obligations. So this is all about growth for Australia. If you're using cryptocurrency, surely that's not actually what's happening. Who benefits?
I'd make an argument, though, that by potentially giving people the ability to grow their wealth in a far bigger way than currency, you are then providing more to Australian people who could then, sell it and spend it in our country.
Okay, so I take you to the ATO on this one, the Australian Taxation Office, and it says receiving cash for the work you do. Your employer may pay your wages in cash rather than into your bank account. And this says some businesses deliberately use cash transactions to avoid meeting their tax obligation and employee responsibilities. So I was just thinking about this. It says here also your rights and responsibilities. So this is the ATO talking to individuals. If you're being paid cash, you must declare the cash as income when you lodge your tax return. It's going to be hard to do for cryptocurrency. You should receive a pay slip showing all your earnings and the amount of tax taken out, and you receive payment summary at the end of the year and check the employer's making your super contributions. So how on earth would one do that, taking into account the objects of the Act and what the ATO want? If we're using cryptocurrency, we are removing a taxation ability in the country, and that's how we run our traffic lights. That's how we.
That's true.
I just wonder if there's something else there we're missing if we're using cryptocurrency.
But it's almost like we're catering to the lowest common denominator here, where if you aren't paid in cash, then you are not going to adhere to your tax obligations. But you could. I mean, you can still do it. Like, you can still be paid in crypto. Liquefy the assets in some way, and then still pay your tax at the end of the year. I mean, just because it's not easy doesn't mean it's not impossible.
So what you're saying is there's a possibility that an employer could pay the wages that go into your bank account in cryptocurrency, but pay their tax obligations, the super, for instance, and the PAYG withholding as a Australian dollar figure.
Yeah. I can't see a situation where you pay your tax in.
You couldn't pay your tax
in crypto.
No, because cryptocurrency is not an Australian based.
But I think the current laws I don't think allow for it, because you have all these obligations about pay slips and things like that. But I think there is potential that if there was a want for it, to change the ability to pay your employees such that you could pay in crypto or in an investment
as an equivalent to
for example, you'd have to prove that the average amount within the last year or however much.
Well,
this is the average amount in that. So
yeah.
you're allowing for contingencies either way.
Well, this is the problem with underpayments, isn't it? So when we talk about underpayments, we think about overall, was that employee paid more or less than what they should have been paid? So if you're paying in cryptocurrency and cryptocurrency changes, when, as an employer, I pay my employees into their bank accounts, there is a point in time with which that currency is worth something specific. But I wonder, by the time it gets transferred, it's worth less or more. How do I account for that later when I'm doing my, at the end of the year, accumulation requirements? Because a lot of awards say that employers who need to stop and have a look at what they paid their employees based on what they actually paid against what the minimum wage is, and pay them the difference. So who at what point do we look at that figure and say, oh, they're under? Because
that's right.
10 months down the track, cryptocurrency could have crashed, and what $1 was worth today is in 8 months' time is now worth 25 cents.
So what you're saying is, and I think you're quite right, that currency has the exact same problem. It just doesn't happen as much.
Doesn't happen as quickly.
And to such drastic amounts. But it has now that you mention it, I actually think this might be a problem for a lot of people. Because if you're paying people bang on the minimum wage, so not a cent more, there's every chance that by the end of the year, well, in the time when they finish their employment, they are actually under.
Except this calculation is done annually, and so is CPI. It stays static for that entire year. What your dollar is worth today is going to be worth the same on 30 January, as far as I understand.
Okay.
Whereas cryptocurrency, it doesn't.
It's a per second.
Yeah.
It's an infinite timeline.
Look, I don't know. This is just a really interesting question, and it brings me to the next point. If we can delve into this a bit more and just go sideways, what about paying people on other things? This came up today in the news this morning. Well, we've been talking about cryptocurrency. What about paying in,
like a car?
Yeah, oranges. I don't know.
Anything. Any good. Or even a service for that.
Any things, yeah, any things. I run a law firm. I'm going to pay you cash, and I'm going to give you a benefit of using legal advice, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, it came up. It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
It's not allowed in Australia. Your minimum wage must be in cash. But what if we change the rules? When I was watching ABC News this morning, they were talking about McDonald's trying to bargain into their enterprise agreement that the snacks...
As in like the chips, that the leftover chips that you might grab a handful.
Well, I've never worked at McDonald's, but there's a lot of people who have.
I can tell you, as someone who works in fast food, you eat an awful amount of chips because they're around.
So, they are... look, for me, it was just a 3-second news article, so I could be completely off base here, but it sounded to me as if they were exploring the options of also having the additional benefits paid in the food with which people eat. McDonald's made it very clear at the time that they are going to comply with all their legal obligations when it comes to. So just set that aside.
So caveat it a little.
Yeah, I'm not talking about McDonald's underpaying their staff. I'm talking about an enterprise agreement changing the way we look at the way payment is made. So if you work at McDonald's, or you work at a clothes store, for instance, and you take home a dress that's worth $120, can you just take that dress and offset it against your pay? It's unlawful at the moment, but I don't know. What's your thoughts? Holidays, cars, we can keep going on here, but I'm talking about your base wage. I'm not talking about all the benefits and the STIs and so on.
You've got the ability there sort of already, where if you were to be underpaying someone, you could then sue them for the amount of benefit that they got in a cross kind of claim. But putting that aside, I don't know about it. I generally think people... I don't think it's good for the economy for people to get it like that. I think you're restricting.
Certainly isn't.
You're restricting flow of cash here, and but then again, if it's by agreement, I mean, if
well, this is the thing, isn't
they
it?
want it,
When we
then-
talk about contracts as a baseline, a contract is just an agreement between two people, intention to be legally binding with consideration. So if all those things exist, the trouble I have with this is not necessarily the employee receiving something worth $120, but what is the employer paying for that? So
Yes,
that's kind of, when I pay my employees cash, it's costing me the same amount as I'm paying. But if I pay them in something else, like my services...
Well, my immediate thought when you just mentioned it there, that you'd have to base it off the cost price rather than the price at the end. Because when you think about it, it's actually a win-win for everyone. If you do it off the cost price, the employer is not losing anything except for the fact that they no longer have that dress on the shelves. But assume
to sell at the higher
to
cost.
sell at a higher amount.
Yeah.
But they still just, they're still only paying $50. They're only paying $50 for the dress.
I guess the question is, what cost price are we talking about? We're talking about the price it costs the employer to receive that good, or we're talking about the cost of the price of the item to receive that good, and the lost opportunity of putting it on the shelf.
I think you'd have to take that into account, some amount, or whatever that looks like.
I don't like it. I think if someone wants to buy something, they should buy something.
You can see it's a win-win for everyone, because I mean the employer is essentially getting benefit of the difference.
Yeah.
And the employer had to pay them anyway.
But what if this employee wants to increase their living quality? How do they do that when half the money they're receiving is through goods?
But is that not their own choice is it their choice to grab this? I think the difference is it their choice to grab the dress, or are they, here is a dress?
I think it's, I'm going to pay you are entitled to $1,000. I'm going to give you $800, and $200 of that is going to be in the form of...
Like a credit towards the store or something.
I have no idea. Yeah. 200, I've calculated that you've eaten, and that's an offset. I don't know. Yeah. I'm going to give... I know that the average employee eats 10 hamburgers in a weekly shift. Excuse me. And that's worth XY dollars. So now the minimum wage is not 1,000, it's now 950. I don't know,
I don't love it. I mean, being completely honest, I think it's...
Doesn't it restrict also what you're buying? And benefits the company insofar as they've got more of their product out there?
So literally just by virtue of all the people...
Yeah, they've got 1,000 employees, they're all walking around in that brand.
Do you think that's... I mean, I know a lot of people that work in retail, and almost all of them have a various discount that might be for buying their own clothes.
Yeah.
Right? Is that the thought process behind? Is it simply just to...
I actually don't know. I heard about it this morning and I've been thinking about it. Every now and again a client comes up to me and says, can I pay my employees in holidays? Can I pay my employees in something else? Instead of giving them, can I give them their minimum wage for the ordinary hours that they work and all the overtime with which they work, I want to give them a holiday instead of the cash money. And the answer is no, you have to give them the money.
Yeah.
But what if the answer is yes?
I don't like it, because I think you end up with a situation where I think inevitably you're going to have employees who would say, I'd rather the money.
Well, that's right. If you take a holiday...
I think it's going to happen.
What if the holiday is you have to holiday with all your workmates? And
presumably that's going to happen.
And then no partners are allowed, and then what do? You're stuck with your workmates on a holiday? Yay?
Yeah, and for that, for the new parent who's barely at home anyway, and really wishes they had this time to actually be with their family.
It's kind of weird, right? So look, I don't know. If anyone out there has a point of view on this, let us know. I just think it's kind of it's that weird cryptocurrency concept, and then if we're going to open that floodgate, is that just a tip of a very dangerous iceberg? If we let that in, what else do we let in? And at what point are we just keeping people for stuff? They're not actually, where does it end?
But I still think it achieves, I actually really think that the crypto thing, I think it has logistical problems, but the idea of paying people in shares and investments, I think can be explored. I think it's almost just too hard.
I don't mind the idea of it being bonuses. I don't like it as ordinary income. STIs, bonuses, stuff like that. The person is not expecting, that your salary is $80,000 a year plus bonuses. If an employer wants to pay in cryptocurrency those bonuses, I don't see anything wrong with that. I've got a real problem with changing our Australian cash money for something, because that person might not know how to use it. They might not want to use it in the same ways that you can use it. I don't think it provides the Australian government with the benefits of actual cash money, because that currency disappears, doesn't stay in Australia, doesn't get used, and all that kind of stuff with GST and everything. So there's less money floating around Australia. I think there are just big issues with it. But who knows? We might live in a Star Trek universe where they're not using money at all one day. So
could be. I mean, we're going to live in a world, I think, very shortly where cash isn't the thing.
Oh my God, cash like a caveman.
Cash. Yes. Like, I can't even remember the last time I was holding on to actual
cash is such
physical cash in my wallet.
And especially in these days where we don't like touching that sort of thing either. Well, anyway, anybody out there got any views on this? Let us know. If you prefer your bonuses and holidays, happy days, let us know. Yeah, cryptocurrency, here we come. You've got an employer who's actually paying you, and I'd be fascinated to find out a little bit more about it.
So one thing I want to touch on, going back to, I think, last week's podcast, we were talking a lot about some of these stranger things that have happened on Zoom calls, and some people who've ended up in very
compromising decisions.
Let's just call it compromising.
For those who didn't watch last time, watch the podcast from last time.
Yes, some very questionable behaviour. People that perhaps are trying to go into different industries, I think.
Yes, possibly.
Whether intentionally or not, they're going into a different industry. But this week, a lawyer, very quickly, he found himself on, I think, almost every news outlet on earth, because he, in all fairness, sounded like an older gentleman, and he found himself in a courtroom, and I actually personally didn't know.
A virtual courtroom.
A virtual courtroom, as I think it was Microsoft Teams, and I didn't know this, but you can actually put filters on yourself in the same way you can in a lot of apps, for example, Snapchat. And here he was appearing in front of a judge and the other side, and he looked exactly like a cat. He had a cat filter on him, and the thing that I thought was the most interesting compared to, I suppose, the other ones we discussed last week, the sheer panic. The sheer panic you could hear in his voice. And obviously, have a look on Google. Just type in lawyer cat filter.
Lawyer cat filter,
you
or
will
something.
find it anywhere.
It's everywhere.
And he is on there, and he's just panicking. And the thing I really loved about it was he maintained his professionalism the entire way through.
He did.
I think he even said something along the lines of,
You're
on. Yeah, I'm happy to proceed.
I'm happy to proceed.
and
I'm not a cat.
Yeah, I think that's the quote of his. I'm not a cat.
I'm not a cat.
just to make sure.
Yeah, and the judge was like, yes, we can accept that, or something.
Yeah, I think the judge maintained his professionalism as well, just to make sure that he wasn't a cat talking in front of him.
Not a cat. Yeah, I really actually love this story, because the lawyer clearly was upset.
He was.
As lawyers, we have to. Our name is sprawled all over these documents. We are in front of a judge who will remember us for the life of our careers.
Yeah.
So we have to behave in so far as the protocol of the courts make us behave or tell us to behave. And there are lots of protocols. And one of them probably isn't do not appear as a cat. But there's
being
lots
generally professional is probably in there somewhere.
There's lots of things about the way we dress and having a jacket on and so on and so forth. So I love this one, because you're absolutely right. Behind the scenes, where the cat, where it's actually in reality.
Yeah. If you were to have a fly in the wall of there would have been, the secretaries there, another lawyer, the paralegals there, and they're all Googling how to fix it, and
I love it.
I actually really loved it.
The guys are sitting here, yes, and you know, and I'm happy to. Yeah, I just love it. I love the fact he's kept it. But I don't know what happened next.
Neither do I actually, because there wasn't on the video, but I would have loved to see it play out. I doubt it. Like, I think they probably would have
adjourned or stood down or something.
Figured it out, but
taken a break from court.
I would have loved them to just continue.
Have the hearing as a cat.
And I mean, is there any real, as long as he maintains his professionalism, is there any
problem with this? Well, look, I think as long as it's an accident and we don't start having this sort of thing happening as a laugh in the courtroom, because it's a serious matter. This was quite a serious offence, and it's, you know, we've got to do our duty to the client and present their case in a way that will give them the best chance of success. I don't see anything wrong with it, as long as they can, that individual is able to present the matter appropriately. Carry on.
So yeah, I just find it really interesting, because compared to the other ones we discussed last week, where I think we can all agree, if you've watched it,
those are inappropriate.
They're getting fired.
They're getting fired.
They're getting fired, and they may very well have question marks about
they're
staying in the industry.
They're practicing certificates and so on.
This gentleman, I think, deserves some praise for being able to continue through it.
Not a cat.
And be professional the entire way through, very apologetic. I mean, he probably doesn't see it this way because he's probably mortified.
Oh my God.
And I would have really hoped the judge, because the judge actually was the one who released the video to the wider world. I really hope he asked him.
I think he would have.
Yeah.
I mean, these courtrooms are open spaces anyway. I don't know how that works in a Teams environment, because if we have a hearing at court, it's almost certainly going to be an open court, so anybody can walk in and out as they please. But I just wonder how that works in a Teams environment. So there would be nothing wrong with it being public. I just
on a professional level, you'd hope. I mean,
all the power to him. He did a really good job.
Yeah, fair to him. I think in 20 years' time, he'll probably laugh about it.
Oh my God, he will be. They're probably laughing about it now, but you think it's a bit soon?
I think he's still got a fair few networking events between now and an event which he will be known as the cat guy. But I suppose it goes to my next sort of question. In New Zealand this week, there was a gentleman who has refused to wear a tie in Parliament.
The parliamentary, the MP, Waiti?
Yes, I believe so. And he famously, I suppose, quoted it as being a colonial noose.
That's right. And then he said it wasn't about the tie.
No, it was about what the tie meant and the fact that they had to dress in a certain way, and it was very kind of English, and it goes back to their history. And I mean, Jacinda Ardern quite rightly said there's bigger fish to fry at the moment.
That's right. The New Zealand Prime Minister was asked about this, wasn't she? And she said she doesn't have a strong point of view of either way, but actually there are bigger issues that we need to deal with today.
I think it flows into sort of what we just spoke about then, though, is what do you think about, I suppose, as you're right, in Parliament and in court?
There are protocols.
It's actually fairly strict.
There are actually rules, though. There's actually a rule in the New Zealand Parliament that one must wear a tie. So it's not just the fact that ties have become one of those things to wear. It is. I think it's actually, and certainly, don't send me 1,000 emails, but if I'm wrong on this, I thought that there was actually a rule.
There was.
That there is a tie. That one must wear a tie. And this particular gentleman was told last time he refused to wear a tie that he would be thrown out if he refused to wear a tie. And that's exactly what happened. Protocols, it's actually a really interesting question and feeds into what I was thinking about today. The Chief Justice of the New South Wales Courts made a really interesting statement in one of his recent speeches in the opening of the New Year, opening of court and so on. And Chief Justice Bathurst said that there needs to be improvements in the diversity of the judiciary, and challenging the perception of the judiciary does not serve the interests of all. When judiciary is perceived as homogenous, it is harder for the public to trust its impartiality in their decisions. The Chief Justice went on to say is, people are more likely to trust the judiciary when, to the extent they believe the judges represent social groups with which they belong. If a community cannot look to the judges and see men and women they identify with, their trust in the ability of the justice system to do right by them may be compromised.
She's asking for a bit more diversity in...
Well, Chief Justice Bathurst blatantly said it was homogenous, and in my view, that's white. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you go to court, I don't think it's so much of an issue, and I may be correct here because I don't know the exact figures, but I don't think it's so much an issue as on the gender front. I think there's plenty of very accomplished female judges.
But we're talking about other races.
Yeah, I think there is a problem there.
Is very Anglo-Saxon,
Very.
I think. I can't point to one that isn't, actually.
No, actually neither can I.
Come to think about it, now that I think about it. So it kind of feeds into this protocol thing. So are we asking, should the courts have this old school protocol? Is that what you're basically saying?
Yeah.
Here?
So, I mean, there's a lot of protocols. So you've got dress codes, things you can say, the way you refer to others, the way you refer to the kind of, when the judge comes in, you stand, you bow. What the judge wears themselves, the way they interact.
How we hand over material, how we don't. There's lots and lots of protocols.
It's very kind of, there's a lot of protocols there, and my understanding is that they're fairly old. They may have adapted in the same way Chinese whispers adapt. It slightly changes and the wording changes.
It would date well back to Cromwell times, I would say.
Very, very old. And I'm not so... Some of them I certainly think achieve what they should be achieving. I certainly think the way we dress is important because it emphasises how serious court is, and that we're doing our duty to the court and we are being seen. But certainly some of them I think can be...
To wear a tie or not a tie, to have a collar, to not have a collar. It is interesting, isn't it? We decided here at MJT Law very recently that we're not taking clients until there is an effective vaccine. And the vaccine is effective, I should say. We don't take clients in the office. So the question comes up is, what should we wear in the office then? And there is this kind of really, I'm going to call it old school way of thought, that if you don't dress as a business person, you don't think like a business person. But I'm of the view that time has moved on from that. We are capable human beings, we're all adults. We know how one should behave. Should the way we wear what we wear change that?
It's a hard one. I'm not so certain that we have as much control over that. I'm not so certain that everyone has the ability to kind of switch and put a mask on irrespective of the environment that they're in, including what they're wearing.
This is true. And is it a uniform? This is why the army has a uniform. Collective, all the same, we are one, we work together. Are lawyers essentially wearing a uniform?
I think there's certainly an argument to be said there. So I think when you arrive in court and everyone is wearing, I mean, as women you have a lot more freedom than we do, but as men generally you're either wearing grey or you're wearing blue. And generally it's either a red tie or a maroon tie. So there's not a lot to differentiate that. You're essentially wearing the exact same stuff. You're in a uniform.
There's a uniform attached to this. So is that what we're doing? We are associating with the legal profession, allowing others to associate us with the legal profession. I mean, I don't know how many times you've been to court. Every now and again I end up at what we call the Roma Street First Appearance Courts. And that's basically everybody who's got a notice to appear for the first time ends up at the Roma Street Courts. And if you walk in with a suit on, people automatically think that you're a lawyer. And that's because lawyers have a uniform.
Yeah, well, I mean, it adds that in Brisbane specifically. The only people in the city who are wearing suits are lawyers and people who are going for a job interview.
You reckon?
I think
You're going to go that far?
I think if you go to George Street and in North Quay, you'll see a lot more suits there than you'll see in the rest of the...
What about the financial services, dude?
I don't know. They're a bit more lax compared to us.
Oh, here we go.
I'm starting a war here between us and the accountants. But...
Accountants versus lawyers. But I think you're right. If we're looking at professional services, and I'm going to broaden it to professional services so I don't get 6,000 emails. I think you're right. There is a uniform to be had. If you're working in any other industry, retail, some sort of computer-based industry, like we've got some people who work directly opposite us in our building, who are in advertising, and none of them ever wear a suit. Ever. I've never seen any of them ever wear a suit, and very few of them actually wear shirts.
Yeah, no.
So maybe we are wearing a uniform, and that's what we should suck it up, and that's what we should do.
But I mean,
are you a fan? Do you like the uniform?
I think when I'm going to court, yes.
Okay.
I find my eye perform better.
Is that perception?
On a personal level.
Okay.
I think I perform better in a suit than I do. Not that I have.
You get your game face on, don't you?
You get your game face.
You put your running shoes on when you go out jogging. You put your suit on when you're focused on achieving a goal for your client.
And it goes for, the fact that the judge is wearing their gown, they're wearing the wig, and you're in the environment, you're in the game, you're on the field.
It's true. Notwithstanding, courtrooms are incredibly cold.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
I don't know. Do you think that's a chicken and egg situation? Are they making it cold so everyone can wear their suit comfortably?
I don't know.
Or are we wearing suits because it is freezing cold?
All I can tell you is that there are courtrooms that even while I'm wearing a suit, I've still got winter woolies underneath because it is so cold.
It is insanely cold in there.
Yeah. So maybe they are. Maybe they're trying to get us to rug up.
Yes. But didn't... and this is a little bit before me, but I believe one of the changes in the protocol was that women were able to wear flats as opposed to high heels.
There's all these protocols have changed, like women who wear skirts must wear stockings, or only closed-toed shoes are allowed in court. I think there's been a watering down, and yes, the flats have come in, and that came in because of this question, I think, in England, where one of the law firms looked to fire a female solicitor who didn't want to wear heels.
Right. I mean, putting that aside, the potential discrimination problems there.
Yeah, I think what they've done, because men get to wear flats.
Yeah. And they're actually fairly comfortable.
Yeah, women's high heels are just not. Yeah, look, I think there's been a relaxing of some of the female protocols. I mean, you say that men must wear a suit and a tie, and there's particular colours that are fairly unoffensive in these environments. I've seen women thrown out for not wearing stockings, told to leave the courtroom.
Wow, okay.
I've seen women told to leave the courtroom for wearing open-toed shoes. So, and that's years ago. But now I think there is a relaxing of that. Like, I've actually attended court without my stockings on. And and I haven't.
I didn't know that was a requirement.
Yeah, and I haven't. I took a chance. And
you were waiting for
didn't wear my stockings.
Miss Thorley.
Miss Thorley. Yeah, and so I was allowed to appear, and I didn't have to excuse my appearance either. When one turns up without a jacket, one must request the judge or ask of the judge to excuse your appearance. Really, what happens is you ask somebody else if you can borrow their jacket in the bleachers.
I've seen one lawyer who had to do it for, I think, a completely legitimate reason. She sole practitioner, and she she was actually on holidays, and one of her matters got rung up into court. She had no one else, and she was completely dressed in normal clothes.
Oh my goodness.
Like absolutely, joggers on, shorts on, and like a polo.
Oh my
god. She was a fairly senior practitioner, so she has a bit more, but she was
this
quite
in a regional court?
Brisbane
Oh
Federal
my
Circuit Court. But quite rightfully, she explained the situation and then the judge knew that it had been rung up, that she had no chance to go home. Fair enough. She was, and she acted professionally the whole way through. I mean, she did a really good job. But certainly that should be the exception to the rule.
So what you're saying is maybe we shouldn't lax the dress rules for court?
No, I think, when they laxed the rules for women, I thought that was a very good decision because you're on your feet a lot. And I think there is a certain discrimination there because you need to be comfortable to perform. And if you're not comfortable because of probably a somewhat archaic rule, then...
Well, I agree. I think not having to wear high heels is great. But let's go back to the colonial noose then. Are we asking for individuals who are not necessarily comfortable with certain ways that Anglo Australians?
Yeah, you're right. Once you start opening the can of worms about comfort, where does comfort end?
Yeah, I'm
also really comfortable in the tracksuit.
That's right. So look, I don't know. Look, obviously, and I think his name was Fa'iti or Waiti or something like that. And yeah, please don't send me lots of emails on that one. But he had. I think, from his perspective, it was a political statement.
His was a political statement.
So that's less about ties in general and more about a political statement.
It was political, but he's opened a can of worms.
He has opened a can of worms.
And
we've got Chief Justice Bathurst here saying that we need to be less homogenous in the courts and identify with different cultures and communities. So, yeah, look, I think there needs to be a shift, probably not out of the suit, but more out of how we train lawyers maybe. So we do have a better community spread. Because studying law is very, very expensive. It is a high GPA that you have to get, or an OP, or whatever the subject, whatever it is. And then once you're in law, it's actually quite a hard subject to pass. There is a lot of dropout rates.
Massive dropout.
And then once you're in law, the hours are very long. The expectations are extremely high. And there is an awful lot of sort of kind of aggro in the environment just because everyone's always in conflict. And I don't think that suits certain cultures.
No.
So there's this kind of challenge about law that from the beginning that it's expensive to get into. You've got to have a very good education to get that high selection ranking or OP or whatever it's called now to even get into law in the first place, and that would cut out the low socioeconomic schools who don't get those GPAs or OPs, sorry. And then you've got the difficulty of doing the law in the first place, and if you don't come from a background where you're academically used to actually studying all the time and reading.
You can go even further and say that the fact is it's a difficult course to pass. Your ability to work, for example, full-time is very low.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, most people that are studying law are either not working at all and are supported by their parents, or are working very minimal. And it's basically they're working for their pocket money. They're working to go, spend it on dinner.
Yeah.
It's not really to survive, which is, hugely...
Yeah, minimum wage and so on and so forth. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of barriers to broadening the cultural sort of spread.
I mean, what the Chief Justice is saying is very true. I think though the issue there is we are 50 years, I think, away from being able to achieve it. Because
2 generations.
We're not even at the stage where the lawyers are.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have to think about it. In order to get to where he wants, which I think we all agree we should eventually get there, is our intake in students isn't even enough. Our pass rate isn't enough.
Right.
Our people are being admitted into lawyers are not even nearly enough. The ones staying at aren't enough. The ones at senior level are not enough.
Right.
Barristers are not enough. So that we're about 8 stages away from that.
Yeah, this is really hard, isn't it?
It's a kind of flow-on effect.
Because we're talking about getting more people from different community backgrounds into law school. So in 30 years' time, they have an opportunity to become a judge.
And they're probably going to, even if we did a really good job today, all right, so tomorrow our intake into students becomes where we think it should be.
Yeah.
Those students are probably going to be 30, in 30 years' time will become the absolute minority in the judiciary.
But there's also an additional problem that law is about the English language.
Yeah, you have to be very good with
when
English.
When I studied law, there were no international students because international students sometimes have not the same grasp of English as a native English speaker, and therefore found the English content in law to be really challenging. So how do we get from there to here? We can't dumb down law because that's just crazy.
No, it's problematic for everyone.
But how do we get other community or
involved?
I actually don't know. Oh my God, that's a big question, right?
It's a very difficult thing to fix. I think everyone can appreciate that there's a problem there, but there are so many barriers.
I was just thinking about this morning about Chief Justice Bathurst quite rightly saying that we need more cultural diversity in the courts. How to achieve that? I actually don't even know where to start.
I think that one of the problems is as well, this is the first time I've ever turned my mind to this. I mean, I don't even think our industry is really even talking about it yet.
No, we're still talking about having more women in the industry.
Yeah. We're kind of doing one battle at a time. And I mean, I certainly can see great strides there. And I personally believe that by the time I'm sort of senior practitioner, I think it might be fairly close to...
absolutely. There are more females
studying
studying law now than males.
Yeah.
So we can assume at some point in the future, but of course there are barriers of women, children, being out of the industry.
Yeah.
Set that aside, the cultural challenges is so far into the future for us.
I'm not... as grave as this sounds, I'm not sure I'll even get to see it in my lifetime.
No. As sad as it sounds, I think you're right. We have a lot of barriers to overseas lawyers who are already lawyers.
Actually, that's right.
Coming to Australia and practicing law here. So what we need to do is open that up
before anything.
Before we start trying to get our law students to get to that position. But yeah, I don't know where to start.
Call me the skeptic, but I'm not so certain lawyers themselves want to open up barriers for potentially overseas lawyers being able to come in. I mean, as bad as that sounds.
Yeah, it's another closed industry, I guess. It's one of these things. But anyway, if anyone has an opinion on this, Chief Justice is right, Chief Justice Bathurst isn't right.
Yeah, give us some ideas about how do we fix this?
How do we fix this? We're in the industry, we're the voices.
And
I
don't really have one.
I
mean, we can try, but...
Yeah. So anything out there, guys? Is he right? Do we need more cultural diversity in our courtrooms in order to make our lawyers and judges more relevant?
Yeah.
More trusting. I don't know.
Yeah, let us know.
I think we're
that's
there
for the week.
Absolutely. Thank you for watching, everybody, and we'll talk to you again in a couple of weeks' time.
All right. See ya.
See you later.